I'm riding into one of Paraguay's rougher areas, and if you're watching this from Australia, America, or Europe, this probably looks very different to what you're used to. It's the favelas, the most dangerous neighborhood in all of Paraguay. You know, one thing I've learned since leaving home is that most people build their entire lives around places they never chose. The suburb, routine, it's the same roads, conversations, same beliefs. And after a while, it all starts to feel normal until you leave. And then you realize that normal was never normal. It was just familiar. And today, I'm riding through an area of Paraguay that a lot of people would probably tell you to avoid. It's a rougher area, an area outsiders might label as dangerous. An area that, well, depending on who you ask, comes with a reputation. Some people watching this are probably thinking, why? Why ride a motorcycle through places like this? Why not stay in the nice areas?
Just had a coffee and I've convinced a local girl that we're going to go for a ride through the favelas. I told her that she's going to be my sacrifice to them if they try and steal anything from me. She doesn't speak English and I don't speak Spanish, so the communication might not have gone through very clearly. Time will tell. Wish us luck.
When you're on a motorcycle, you don't have much separating you from the world. No steel doors, tinted windows, protection. You've just got awareness. Maybe that's exactly why I enjoy it. Because riding a motorcycle strips life back down to something real. You notice everything. The roads, people, sounds, dogs, traffic, the atmosphere. You stop drifting through life on autopilot. You become present. And if you've ever ridden overseas before, especially somewhere in South America, it can feel like sensory overload because this isn't like back home. Roads are unpredictable. Rules are unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Here, things move differently, and the first mistake foreigners make is thinking different means bad, but it doesn't. Different just means you need to understand where you are. A lot of Western media has conditioned people to fear places they've never seen. You hear words like favela, poor area, dangerous neighborhood, and immediately people imagine chaos, crime, fear. And yeah, like everywhere, there's places that you need to respect. But one thing I've learned traveling is that danger is often misunderstood, because danger doesn't always look the way people imagine. Sometimes the biggest danger is comfort. Comfort keeps people living lives they secretly hate. Comfort keeps people dreaming instead of acting. And that might sound strange while I'm riding through an area like this, but think about it. How many people watching this feel trapped? And somewhere along the way they stopped feeling alive. That was me once too. And maybe that's why these rides matter to me, because they remind me that life still has edges, that the world is still real, that not everything has been sterilized. And look around here. What do you see? Because I guarantee that what locals see and what outsiders see are often two different things. An outsider might see poverty, but locals might see home, family, community, survival, history. And I think that matters, because one thing I try and avoid while filming places like this is disrespect. I'm not here pretending to be some fearless tough guy, or to exploit people, or act like danger is entertainment. I'm here to understand and show, because there is a difference, a big difference. And when you ride through places like this, you learn very quickly that respect matters. You don't ride around acting arrogant. You don't assume people owe you anything. And you definitely don't arrive with that Western attitude, thinking money or nationality makes you important, because it doesn't. Respect matters everywhere, especially here. And riding a motorcycle teaches you that too, because on a bike you're exposed. You can't fake confidence. You can't hide nervous energy. You become part of the environment. That's vulnerability. It's what I love, because motorcycles force honesty. You pay attention. You scan constantly. The road surface, movement, people, traffic, dogs, loose gravel. And if you ride in South America, you learn very quickly that the road itself can be more dangerous than people, because sometimes the biggest risk isn't crime. It's a pothole the size of a bloody bathtub, or oil, or sand, or someone pulling out unexpectedly. And I'll say something that might surprise people. Some of the roughest looking areas I've ridden through have also been some of the friendliest. That doesn't mean you switch your brain off. When you're on a motorcycle, you don't have much separating you.
You know the little gel blasters like that you shoot through guns? It tastes like you're like eating one of those. they just pop in your mouth. It's like when you're so hungry for something and your mouth starts salivating. When you pop them, that you just feel like juice. They explode in your mouth. It's so good.
Because yes, money does matter. The cost of living matters. Freedom matters. But if I'm being real, most people who move overseas are chasing something bigger than just cheaper rent. They're chasing a feeling. And usually it's a feeling they lost years ago. A feeling of possibility. A feeling that life can still surprise them. That they can still reinvent themselves. And I understand that. Because for a long time, I think I was chasing that too. Back home, life can be very structured, predictable, safe. And sometimes that safety comes with a cost. You wake up, you go to work, you pay your bills, you do what's expected. And before you know it, years disappear. And maybe you've built a good life. Maybe you've got assets, a house, a career. But quietly, something inside of you starts asking questions. Is this it? Is this really the entire movie? And those questions get louder with time. Some people silence them. Some people stay busy. Some people buy more things. But some people eventually leave. And that doesn't mean they hate where they came from. That's important, because sometimes people misunderstand that. Leaving somewhere doesn't automatically mean rejection. Sometimes it just means that you're ready for a new chapter. And for me, Paraguay became part of that chapter. Now, I'm not here pretending that Paraguay is perfect, because no country is. That's a fantasy. Every place has got problems. Every system has flaws. Every country asks something different from you. And one thing I've learned is that moving overseas doesn't magically solve your life. That's another fantasy. If you're unhappy, if you're lost, if you lack purpose, you'll probably bring those problems with you. I know I sure did. Different scenery, same mind. And I think people need to hear that, because social media can create illusions. You see travel content, you see beautiful girls, cheap living, palm trees, and people think paradise is automatic, but it isn't. Paradise still requires work, discipline, adaptation, and honesty with yourself. But what moving overseas can do is create space. Space to breathe. Space to rethink your life. Space to step outside the system that shaped you. And maybe that's one of the biggest advantages. Because when you leave your home country, something interesting happens. You start seeing your own culture differently. And that surprised me. Because once you step outside something, you notice things that you never questioned before. The expectations, the financial treadmill, the social conditioning. And suddenly you realize how much of life you were running on autopilot. And maybe that sounds philosophical, but riding through places like this makes me think about those things. Because look around, this is real life. It's not polished, it's not filtered, it's real struggles, it's real survival. And I respect that, because whether someone lives in a luxury apartment or a rough neighborhood, people are still trying to build a life. They're still trying to provide. Everyone's searching for happiness, and honestly, that's something that travel teaches you. We're all more similar than what we think. We might have different languages and like different food and drive on different streets, but we still have the same human emotions. Love, fear, hope, pressure. Maybe that's why I enjoy riding through areas that tourists usually avoid, because tourism can sometimes create a bubble. Nice hotels, restaurants, it's safe zones, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it can hide reality. And I'm not saying that people should take risks or act foolish, because awareness matters, especially on a motorcycle. But when you ride overseas, you learn quickly that confidence and recklessness are not the same thing. Lessons matter, because some foreigners arrive with ego. They're thinking that they're untouchable. They think rules don't apply to them. They think money protects them. And usually that ends badly, because respect matters, situational awareness matters, and common sense that most people don't have matters. I'll tell you something I've learned riding bikes. The motorcycle doesn't care about your confidence. The road does not care about your passport. physics don't negotiate. And honestly, that's what I love, because there's humility in riding. You're constantly reminded that you're not in control of everything. And maybe that's healthy, especially for men, because modern life sometimes creates the illusion of control. But motorcycles, travel, unfamiliar environments, they remind you to stay grounded, to stay alert, to stay humble. And while I ride through places like this, I'm not trying to act fearless. I know that fear exists, and fear has a purpose. It keeps you observant, it keeps you sharp. The problem isn't fear, the problem is paralysis. And there's a difference, because some people let fear become their prison. Fear of change, fear of travel, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of leaving familiar systems. And sometimes those fears become bigger than reality itself. I've seen it. People spend years talking about freedom, but they never move. They never act. They never take the leap. And eventually the dream gets smaller until it disappears completely. And that's something I never wanted for myself. Not anymore. As I ride through these streets, there's something strangely grounding about it, because places like this remind you that life is not meant to be watched from behind glass. And I know some people watching this might be nervous just seeing footage like this, but maybe you're just sitting at home watching from Australia, America, Europe, and thinking, mate, why are you doing this? And honestly, I get it. Because when people hear words like rough area, favela, or dangerous neighbourhood, the imagination usually fills in the blanks. And imagination is powerful, sometimes more powerful than reality itself. But one thing that travel teaches you is that assumptions are often lazy. Reality is usually more complicated, because danger isn't always where people expect it to be. And that's something I've learned riding motorcycles. People assume the biggest danger is crime. And yeah, you should stay away, but you gotta respect your surroundings. You shouldn't ride distracted or careless. But if I'm being honest, the road itself has probably scared me more than people have. Because on a bike, everything matters. A small mistake becomes a big mistake very quickly, particularly riding in Paraguay or anywhere else in South America. You learn fast. Road conditions change. Traffic behaves differently. Animals appear out of nowhere. People move unpredictably. And if you're too relaxed, too confident, the road humbles you very quickly. That's why I always say motorcycle riding isn't about ego. It's about awareness. And there's a lesson in that, because awareness matters in life too. Not just riding, life, the people around you, the choices you make, the environments you enter. Awareness matters. And maybe that's why I love traveling on a bike, because it forces presence. You can't ride well while mentally somewhere else. You can't sit there worrying about emails or social media or problems from 6 years ago. The bike pulls you into now. And honestly, that feeling is addictive. The road becomes meditation. And maybe some riders watching understand exactly what I mean, because there's a strange peace that happens when you stop overthinking and simply move through the world. And maybe that's another reason I film this. It's not just to show Paraguay, but to show perspective, because if you've spent your whole life inside familiar systems, you start believing the world is smaller than what it really is. You start believing there's only one way to live, one way to work, one way to build a future, one way to think. That's all we're taught in school. But then you travel, and suddenly you realize that millions of people live completely different. And they're fine, maybe even happier. And that doesn't mean one culture is better than another. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that perspective matters. And sometimes perspective only comes when you leave comfort. Look around here. The buildings, streets, movement. It might look chaotic to some people, but chaos is life. Because one thing I've noticed is that places with less polish often have more human interaction, more conversation, more community. People are outside, they're talking, kids are playing, neighbourhoods are interacting. And maybe that's something that many Western societies have lost. Not completely, but definitely partially. Because modern life can become very isolated. We have big houses with closed doors. We have screens and headphones on. Individualism. And before you know it, people are living beside each other without knowing each other. And I think about that sometimes, especially riding through places like this, because wealth and quality of life aren't always identical. And that's important. I mean, absolutely money matters. Financial freedom matters. But quality of life matters more. It's bigger than numbers. It's atmosphere, connection, time. I keep banging on, but it's freedom, energy. And that's partly why Paraguay appealed to me. It's not perfection, it's not fantasy, but it's possibility. Because one thing I noticed after arriving here was that pressure felt different. And if you've lived in certain Western systems, you know what I mean. Constant pressure, financial pressure, housing pressure, social pressure, pressure to perform, pressure to keep climbing, pressure to maintain appearances. And eventually that pressure becomes background noise. It's so constant that you stop noticing it until you leave, and then suddenly you realize how heavy it was. Now that doesn't mean Paraguay's easy. That's just another misconception. Moving overseas isn't easy. Some people arrive and struggle badly, particularly with the language. I'm struggling with that myself. The culture, loneliness, the administration with banking and residency, missing family, feeling disconnected. And honestly, some people leave because reality hits harder than fantasy. That's why I always tell people, don't move countries just because you're chasing an Instagram dream. Move because you genuinely want change. Because change demands sacrifice. And sacrifice is rarely glamorous. I've learned that myself. Rebuilding isn't glamorous. Starting again is not glamorous. But sometimes it's necessary. And maybe that's why I connect with motorcycles too. Because bikes understand rebuilding. You fall, you learn, you adjust, and then you ride again. There's no drama, no self-pity. It's just growth. And maybe life works the same way. But children these days, they're not allowed to get dirty. They're not allowed to fall down and hurt themselves. They're not taught that failure is part of life. Because the truth is, most people are so scared of discomfort, but discomfort is often where transformation begins. It's not comfort. It's not certainty. Discomfort. And maybe that's what this ride represents. It's not danger for views. It's not pretending to be fearless, but it's choosing experience over stagnation, choosing movement over routine, and choosing curiosity over fear. Sometimes the streets that people warn you about end up teaching you more than the streets that people tell you are safe. And maybe that sounds strange, but I've been thinking about fear lately, because fear is interesting to me. It protects us, but it also limits us. And that's the difficult part. It's knowing the difference, because there's healthy fear and there's inherited fear. Fear that didn't come from experience, but from stories, the media, other people, social conditioning. And I think a lot of people live inside inherited fear. Fear of traveling, fear of unfamiliar cultures, fear of moving overseas, fear of risk, fear of judgment, fear of stepping outside the script. And sometimes that fear becomes so normal that people stop questioning it.
You know, I wasn't actually going to put this on the video, but I thought I have to because it's just so bad, right? This here is my chicken meal. Like, look how skinny this is. They bloody roller pin this out, and that's the chicken. That wouldn't even be 200 grams. It looks like it's a decent size. It's scammed. Gracias. And doing that just pays for lunch.
They mistake comfort for security, and security can become a prison too. Now that doesn't mean recklessness. I want to be clear about that, because there is a difference between courage and stupidity, a big difference. If you move overseas, you still need common sense. You still need awareness, you still need respect and honesty. That's something I wish more expats understood, because I've seen both sides. I've seen foreigners arrive humble, curious and respectful, and those people usually do well. Then I've seen the opposite. Foreigners who arrive acting entitled, thinking the world owes them something, thinking that money makes them superior. And honestly, that mentality never sits well with me. Because when you move to another country, you're a guest. That matters. You might live there, you might build a life there, you might even stay permanently. But respect for the local culture matters. Language matters. Humility matters. And one thing I've noticed in Paraguay is that people are often warmer than outsiders expect. They're more patient, they're more social, they're more family oriented. And that surprised me because Western media rarely shows that side. They show the stereotypes, but stereotypes never tell the full story. And maybe that's why I enjoy these rides, because the camera captures reality, not headlines, just streets, people, movement, life unfolding. And sometimes that reality changes assumptions. Now I'll say something that might make people uncomfortable. Some Westerners move overseas and fail, not financially or emotionally, but because they expected escape. And escape is dangerous. If you're running from yourself, no country fixes that. The lessons matter, because changing geography doesn't automatically change identity. You still wake up with the same habits, the same mindset, the same emotional patterns. And that's why I think successful expats do something different. They adapt, they stay curious, they accept discomfort, and maybe most importantly, they stop comparing everything, because comparisons ruin experience. I've seen it. People arrive overseas and spend months saying, back home this is better, back home that's better, back home we do this differently. But honestly, if home was so perfect, why leave? That's not criticism, it's just perspective. Because moving overseas means accepting difference, not demanding familiarity. And maybe that's why I enjoy Paraguay, because it challenges me. And I love challenge. It's healthy. It's not always comfortable, but it's healthy. Look at the roads. Look at the streets. The environment asks something from you. Attention, respect, awareness. And maybe life should ask more from us, because modern comfort can sometimes dull people. Everything is convenient. It's delivered. It's immediate. It's just like dating, right? And after a while, you stop engaging with the world directly. You become a spectator. And motorcycles are the opposite of that. Motorcycles demand engagement. You feel the weather, the temperature, the road vibration, the smells, movement, risk. And maybe that's why riding feels so alive, because you're participating, you're not observing. I think that feeling connects travel too. Travel pulls you back into participation. You order food differently, you navigate differently, you communicate differently. You become a beginner again, and that can be humbling, especially for men, because most men hate feeling inexperienced. But growth usually begins there, at the edge of competence, at the edge of certainty. And maybe that's why so many people secretly want change but never take it. Because change threatens identity. It forces questions. Who am I? Who am I without routine? Without social status? Without familiar systems? And those questions can feel uncomfortable. But sometimes they're exactly the questions worth asking. And maybe that's why I ended up here. Not because Paraguay is perfect, not because I was chasing a fantasy, but because something inside of me wanted more experience, more perspective, more life. And maybe some of you watching understand that feeling, that quiet voice that says, there has to be more than this. Not necessarily more money, just more life. And I think that's what a lot of people are really chasing. It's not luxury, it's not status, but aliveness. Because deep down, most people don't want endless comfort. They want meaning. And meaning usually lives slightly outside of comfort. As I'm riding through the favela, I'm reminded of something important. People often judge environments. They often do this without understanding the people living inside them. And that can make us blind. Because from a distance, it's easy to reduce places to labels. Poor, dangerous, run down, unsafe. And maybe sometimes those labels contain pieces of truth, but only pieces. Because places are made of people. And people are always more complex than labels. And I think about that while writing here, because if you've travelled enough, you realise something surprising. Poverty and dignity are not opposites. That's important, because Western society sometimes confuse wealth. They confuse it with worth, and they're not the same thing. Of course money matters. I'm not romanticising hardship. Hardship is hard. Poverty creates struggle, stress, pressure, limited options. That reality is real. But dignity, that's something different. And I've seen dignity in places outsiders would dismiss. Families supporting each other, people working and helping, people surviving with pride and honesty. And that humbles me, because sometimes the wealthiest places emotionally are not always the wealthiest financially. And maybe that's one thing Paraguay taught me. People here often value connection differently. Family and time, relationships, they all matter here. And I think in Western societies, in chasing efficiency, sometimes lost pieces of that. Not completely, but enough to notice. Because back home life became transactional. Everyone's so busy, they're moving, they're optimizing. But eventually people stop slowing down. They stop talking and connecting. And maybe that's why some foreigners feel different here. Not because life is perfect, but because the energy feels different. They're less rushed. They're more human. And you know, some people might get triggered by that comment, because people love absolutes. A country is either amazing or it's terrible. It's either paradise or a disaster. But neither really works like that. Paraguay has problems. So does every country. Here it might be infrastructure or bureaucracy, economic challenges, rough areas, road conditions. Some of these things do frustrate locals and foreigners alike. But at the same time, it has strengths too. Warmth and opportunity, affordability and space. But most importantly, breathing room. And breathing room matters, especially if you're rebuilding, especially if you're starting again. Because something I've realised is that reinvention costs energy, and some environments drain energy faster than others. That doesn't mean one place is universally better, but it does mean that some places fit certain chapters of life better than others. And maybe Paraguay became that for me. It's just a different chapter. It's definitely not the final chapter for me. It's just a chapter. And maybe that's another thing that travel teaches you. You don't need forever to figure it out. You just need the courage. The courage to step into your next chapter. Because honestly, most people wait too long for certainty. They want guarantees, a perfect plan, zero risk. And life rarely gives you that. That's true in business, relationships, travel, everything. Most people don't fear places. They fear the unknown. And maybe the unknown is exactly where life becomes interesting. This channel isn't just about Paraguay. It's about freedom, perspective, adventure, and discovering what life can really look like when you stop living entirely inside of fear and routine. We've got motorcycle rides, street walks, real expat life, business, relationships, and the truth about building a life abroad. So if that sounds like your kind of journey, hit subscribe, come ride with me, and be part of the next chapter.